agree, depending upon what you want to do, but you must ask permission. And these agencies, they don't think they have to ask permission. And we've had quite a few battles. We had a glorious battle over the grain silos that we were taking down in Buffalo to build our business there. Grain silos and asbestos. And we were following all the rules, but we weren't going to let the EPA come in to tell us that, we were doing the right thing. We knew what we were, and they never asked permission. We probably would have worked it out with them. So this is a big threat, a tax on our treaty freedoms. And then the big one, the historic one that's lasted for 200 years, the states. The state government is constantly trying to attack us. It's really, why is that? State governments do not have a treaty with us. They don't have a promise of peace. They don't have a promise of respecting our land title. And we think it makes sense that as American governments, that they should be living under the same legal requirements, because those are federal treaties, the law of the land, but that they behave as though they're disconnected, they're unanchored to those promises. And states are greedy. States want money, they want land, they want jurisdiction, and then they're backed up by a lot of greedy corporations and speculators who want to take our money. So we end up, once again, in the case of New York, fighting over taxes. And when everyone's poor, it's taxes on the land. But then we start having business ventures with non-Indians. We have customers coming into our territory. And the state of New York thinks it can tax the commerce in our territory with the non-Indian. Our position is pretty clear. That taxing authority stops at the territory line. If you want to tax your citizens, who come into our land to buy cigarettes or gas or, pencils or milk or whatever, that's between you two back home. It's not our business to be your tax collector, and we will not be your tax collector. And so New York, has been relentless in trying to tax our commerce. And the cigarette is, again, it's unique because it's a profitable product. It's a product that big companies are involved in. They don't want little companies involved in it. And it's because they have a great ability to orchestrate political and economic power. And so the courts, we fought in the courts for 30 years. And this last summer, we were unsuccessful in keeping the state from being able to tax the cigarettes that were imported into our nation and resold. Well, it took 30 years. And in our case, the state of New York thought they were going to, the rhetoric of this was unbelievable. There's $1 billion of money that the Indians are sitting on. If we could just tax their cigarettes, the state's budget problems will be eliminated. Well, guess what? We just happen to have evolved tobacco manufacturing businesses in our nation. And I think the last count from a couple of weeks ago was $27 million had been generated statewide from new tax collections, presumably from the lost Indian sales. 1 billion, 27 million. We could have told them that. Anybody who lives within 25 miles of a state boundary is buying their cigarettes in that state, when New York State has the highest taxes in the country. But it's about the money. It's nothing really more noble than that. I know there are many students here, and I don't know how you feel about this, but it's just kind of raw and ugly. It's like, who cares what the treaty says? You've got something we want. We're going to take it. And that's what the cigarette litigation has been about. We see it now with gaming business. New York State promised us in 2002 that we would have the exclusive right, the Seneca Nation, to offer slot machines in western New York. That being west of State Route 14, which is about Geneva, right near here. And that was a promise. And the federal law requires it because the Congress, in this particular instance, respected our treaty rights that we would not be subject to taxes by the state. No taxes, charges, or fees on Indian gaming. But the state could sell you the exclusive right to offer slot machines in your area. So we bought it. 25% off the top. Everyone complains, oh, you don't pay me to the state. Boy, 25% is a crazy tax. More than any other business would pay. But that's what the rate was. And so now they're talking about legalizing it everywhere. Oh, I've even heard the argument. This is all driven by, of course, our economic opponents, the operators of the racinos, who are trying to turn those businesses into casinos. Oh, Senecas, you'll be fine. You won't have to pay the state anymore. Well, we'll also lose our monopoly that was promised to us in 2002, and we won't make as much money, even though we're not paying the state. It's about economic contest and conflict. That's what's going on here. And it's being driven by the state. So we are actively engaged in advocating with the state officials. Live up to the deal that you made to us. And even if you don't care about the morality of living up to the deal, accept the economic reality that the Seneca Nation employs 4,000 people at our business, most of whom are non-Indians, and that do pay taxes to your government and support local communities in the entirety of Western New York. And that this Seneca business makes almost $700 million a year, and it brings it in, half of it from Canada, from Pennsylvania, from Ohio, from other parts of New York State, not from that local region. It's a big destination, our businesses. That's why it's good for everybody. But the point is, here we are once again. We had a deal, it was promised to us, and now we're having to spend time and energy and money to protect a deal that we thought should have been already secured until 2023. It's not fair. It's just not fair. But it is part of life. And there's no way to escape it in terms of what it means to be Haudenosaunee in this day and age. You always have to keep fighting. So, when we talk about why, it's about the money, I think. In the old days, the land was the money, right? I mean, land is wealth. And we lost much of our territory because of that economic conflict. And also because, frankly, maybe we were too generous and open with our immigration policy. You know, that we thought that two-row meant that there would be a point where we'd just be respected, but you know, these folks have an amazing ability to want more. And we may have underestimated the appetite. Well, today, it's still about the money. But interestingly enough, and I say this with pride, I really take it quite as an honor that part of the economic future, in my view, of Western New York is tied to the success of the Seneca Nation. And I believe that in my heart. I also believe it because I have been told that by some of the captains of industry in Western New York, that if we can find a way to better work with the Seneca Nation and use and work with your economic position and your legal rights and your advocacy to create new jobs in Western New York, that's what's going to help keep Western New York from dying, more than perhaps any other one thing. And so that's a very new revelation that maybe even Seneca people have never fully appreciated about how integral important we are economically for the future. There's another big threat, and I don't have a real great answer to it, and that is that we're different. We're different people. We have a different society, and we have different values. And there's something rooted in Americanism that is hostile to different things. And maybe because the country itself is this unique amalgam of sort of peoples from all over, and that Americanism is this notion of creating something from nothing or from everything into something new and different. That it's a cultural pulverizer. And when we're surrounded by it, there's an innate instinct, I think, to want to destroy what surrounds us. Or excuse me, what we're surrounded by. And that's a thing to think about, actually. Because I taught a great class. It was probably one of the most fun classes I taught before I started being a politician, was at Syracuse, called Comparative Legal Colonialism, American Indian Nations and Iraq. Because the same rhetoric and the same justification that these people are a threat to us. The number one, military. Number two, they have economically something that we want. For us, the land, and for them, the oil. And then thirdly, of course, the humanitarianism. If they could just live like us and be more like us, they'd be better off, and so would we. And that's exactly the same historical justification that was used to do what was done to us. And the historical narrative is hauntingly parallel to the modern times that we're living in with other people. the last big threat, I think, ignorance. When governments educate their people, like the United States does, to be almost virtually stripped of historical knowledge, I don't think it's an accident. I think if you know things about the past, you are afraid to do the same thing again if it's a bad thing. And you're more respectful of the good things. But when you look at what the American public education system is designed to do, to sort of teach just enough to be economic contributors, to teach just enough to be patriotic enough to die in a war, to be patriotic enough to be American enough to be able to serve the country. But don't think too much. Don't think too much about what you're doing. Because you may end up not wanting to do what we, the government, want you to do. That's what we're dealing with. Right. And I was really impressed, quite honestly, when I came into this building tonight. And I saw these great murals. It's a public school teaching about our creation story and about our treaty belts and our history here in Canandaigua. And I thought, maybe there's a little bit more hope. Maybe there's some people here that are a seed, a catalyst of knowledge and understanding that could perhaps blossom. And I thought that was a really great thing. And so I think this ignorance is always a threat. It's a threat to all societies if people don't know. And I'm really glad to see that even though it's been a problem, there may be moments and opportunities for it to be undone. Now, what can we do about all of this in terms of protecting our treaty? I think it's a matter of personal commitment, but of course, it's a big problem. How can you deal with this at a bigger level? Become a personal ambassador, an advocate for understanding. And I think that's what this commemoration is all about. Not just non-natives, but Haudenosaunee people. You know, I was saying to my wife, and you know, my family's here tonight, and I'm glad that they're here. My mother, you really can't do anything in the Seneca Nation without taking your mother somewhere. You know, so she's here. You know, we go to work together. I mean, it's really, but I'm not the only one, so it is a cultural icon, I guess. But we have this obligation of our own people. And I'm worried that our own children and our own nation don't know enough about their obligations to keep our treaty rights alive, to keep our government running. You know, I jokingly, half-jokingly say, well, if we don't teach our young people how to run our government, who's going to take care of us when we're old? And it's a very important thing to pass on these lessons, and we have to do that. Secondly, I think we can... just one second. I think we can teach politicians too. I think we can actually educate political officials about treaty rights. We saw one today. And he's a really good man, Tom Reed. I don't know what your politics are, how you feel about him. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Seneca. I'm the president of my nation. And I believe, and I believe in the people who believe in us. And you can be a Democrat who's left to center, you can be a right-wing Republican, you can be a Green Party, I don't really care. How do you feel about our treaty rights? How do you feel about our sovereignty? And people come from all different stripes. I've seen them. I've worked in the government. I've been out there. There are good people who get it. And they may get it for a lot of reasons. They may get it because they're good people. They may get it because they're good people who also understand we employ 6,000 people in Western New York. We've had county legislative officials in our building saying things like, thank God for the Seneca Nation. You're the biggest employer in this area, and we want to keep working with you to make it happen. It's enough to floor you, given the hostility and conflict we've had over the years. Sometimes it's as simple as just reaching out, going into someone's office in Albany or Washington. How do you do? We're from the Seneca Nation. We'd like to teach you a little bit about who we are, what our issues are.